Hi, yes, I'd just like to say a little bit about our experience of trying to implement behavioural insights in HSE and with our stakeholders in ways that change the environment within which people make health and safety decisions. I think it's fair to say it's a fairly new innovation for us. Our default policy position has often assumed rationality. You know, either if you don't do what you're supposed to do, we're going to enforce, we're going to regulate, we're going to prosecute. Or, you know, if directly communicating with workers or at-risk people, X is dangerous. If you do Y, it will protect you from X, so therefore you'll do Y. But as we all know, we don't behave in that sort of way. We all know what we're supposed to do in all sorts of different environments. We're supposed to have 5 fruits and veg a day. We're supposed to consume 2,000 calories, 30 minutes of exercise, no more than 14 units a week. But there's all sorts of other drivers which affect our behaviour, out with the very sensible information and our desire to do the right thing. So we're a little bit less like Mr. Spock and a little bit more like Homer Simpson that Deirdre and I were discussing at the break. The reason, what drives our behaviour most of the time is our subconscious, our system 2 thinking. We talked about automated cars, but most people will have come here in a manual stick-shift car and you won't remember changing gear at all on the way here. That will have worked perfectly well for you. That's the reason we sometimes go back and check that we've locked the door or turned the gas off. We always have locked the door and we always have turned the gas off, but we've done so automatically. So most of the time, the subconscious drivers of behaviour work very well. And we don't need to switch into system 2 mode, which is where you cognitively weigh up costs and benefits of doing various things. So it doesn't always work well though. If you think about, we know the safest form of transport is aeroplanes. Is that still true? Safest form of transport is aeroplanes. However, after 9/11, air travellers in the United States could very easily conjure up and were scared of those images resulting from 9/11. And so many of them switched to road rather than plane that the increase in road deaths exceeded the increase of deaths that would have happened if there'd been a terrorist attack bringing down a plane every single week. But because we could think of it, because it brought about emotions, it drove people to make that irrational decision to switch to roads. Now, advertisers, the commercial world, has used these kind of nudges which rely on heuristic biases in our decision making driven by our subconscious for many years. If you think about the Christmas ads, the John Lewis ads, they're always lovely, they're always heartwarming, they never say anything about we've got a large range of products, it's cheap, the service is good, none of that, but it all works very well for John Lewis product sales. And in recent years, government has been getting in on the act. Most famously, HMRC have used those letters that say 9 out of 10 people pay their tax on time. And that's more effective than £8 million worth of inspector resource saying we're going to come around and get you if you don't pay your tax on time. And so what HSE decided to do was to try and get in on the act and to think about the different levers or nudges or subconscious drivers which would incentivise desirable health and safety behaviour. We initially reviewed all the evidence around what psychological drivers were. Then we looked for their use in a policy context, and then we thought about how they could be applied to health and safety. We collected information from different sectors about how they had been used in health and safety, and after a while we started going out to our stakeholder groups, things like the Welding Fuels Partnership, Noise and Vibration, Forestry Industry Safety Partnership, different partnership groups of unions, healthcare providers, large employers, interested government agencies, and thought about how we could apply behavioural insights to the very specific challenges, the very sort of micro challenges that happened in their sector or their workplace. Quite short sessions with stakeholders, so we came up with a very kind of simple schematic or a memoir or checklist of things that they could use. So it's kind of simple or pragmatic or quick and dirty, depending on how you want to look at it. What I'm going to talk about today is 3 of the nudges: salience, priming, and choice architecture, as they're very much around sort of changing the environment, whether it's the physical environment, the process within which people are working, or the messages around them. But I'll just very quickly go through some of the other nudges in our handy mnemonic inspect checklist. Okay. Firstly, we thought about what the deterrents were to poor health, and asked people to think about what the deterrents are to poor health and safety behaviour, and how we can incentivise desirable behaviour, perhaps by emphasising the immediate costs of it. What incentives would work within your system? Well, a nice example there is from the Olympic construction project, which is the only construction project which didn't, Olympics construction project which resulted in no deaths of workers. One of the reasons for this was the high rate of near misses. It wasn't that people always, high rate of reporting near misses, investigating the first causes of those near misses. People were encouraged to do that by companies giving a donation to a charity a charity supporting children with a disease that one of the workers' children suffered from. So they didn't give a financial incentive to the workers themselves. They thought that might encourage over-reporting, but there was an incentive. Near miss reports went up. It's fair to say that incentives in and of themselves, as I think somebody's already mentioned, aren't that effective, but it was generally a good safety culture using lots of good practices. We've talked about norms, reinforcing desired norms of health and safety. So publicising good practice, rather than saying 80% of people aren't wearing their PPE, and that's wrong. People like to be as good as other people. They don't necessarily like to be better. So the HMRC 9 out of 10 people pay their tax on time letters work, but an electricity company in California told people if they were using less electricity than other people on their street. They found out that the following quarter, people reverted to the norm and started using more electricity. I'm going to talk about salience, priming and choice architecture. Using emotional cues, such as people's reactions to certain words, sights or sensation, perhaps talking about the personal effect of health conditions on the family of the sufferer. The Noise and Vibration Partnership came up with a poster about a grandfather who wasn't able to hear his grandchildren practicing the violin as a result of not using proper ear protection, although I've got a daughter who's learning to play the violin, and that's not necessarily the best disincentive. In HSC we've got a really effective video of Phil the welder who's got bad asthma and can't play with his kids as a result, and that has been very effective. We've got excellent feedback from that. And also, who are trusted messengers for different constituencies that are at risk? How can you encourage them to spread the word? Who's got credibility with people that you're trying to influence? It tends to be people like them. So if you can get somebody who's like them to talk from their experience, that can be effective. People who are perceived as legitimate authorities, or people who have relevant expertise. Salience, this is about changing the message in the air around you. Does anybody recognise this? Dumb ways to die, yes, brilliant, yes. Dumb ways to die. We talked about messages going viral or not going viral. This definitely went viral. Everybody who's got teenage kids, they will know that, will have heard them singing Dumb Ways to Die. Catchy Australian commercial showing dumb ways to die, selling both your kidneys on the internet or eating a 3-week-old unrefrigerated pie, and ending with people who die by driving around the gates of a level crossing or crossing the tracks. In the 3 months of the launch, railway injuries and deaths fell by 21% in Victoria, where the campaign ran. Had a very catchy lyric stuck in your head, little earworm, so very effective. We've used the Shattered Lives campaign as slips and trips were sort of seen. Our audience research showed that slips and trips were seen as sort of slightly amusing, really, slipping on a banana skin, that kind of thing. Whereas in actual fact, they're responsible for 1/3 of workplace injuries and can be very serious. We aim to change the discourse around that. One thing I would say about advertising is the effect doesn't last, and what you need to do is, past 6 months, what you need to do is use that time of awareness raising to embed practices. We collected some good case studies. The Tulip meat processing company, as a result of this, changed their floor services, do easy grip, to easy high grip floors. They revised their cleaning procedure, so they built it into their process flow diagram of how work was carried out, and that resulted in a 28% reduction in slips and trips. Messages are easier to remember if they are simple. Using rules of thumb and mnemonics can help in that respect. Vices, you might have heard of that. It's used to prompt people who store flammable materials, and it talks about using ventilation, controlling ignition, containment, exchange for something less flammable, and separation. And anybody who works with flammable materials will know that. It sticks in your mind. Similarly, rules of thumb. I think quarry workers, a rule of thumb is that if they can see over the road's edge, then the protection isn't high enough to protect them. So those kind of things that are catchy and easy to remember. In the short term, you have to do work to embed it. Can have an impact. And in our stakeholder workshops, people came up with other ways to increase salience. For example, in ceramics, participants suggested that perhaps dust could be made more noticeable by using UV lighting, that kind of thing. We were really impressed with some of the things that the workers and the union reps particularly came up with, very micro things that they thought might be helpful. Right, priming. We know that your subconscious responds to kind of cues. It reawakens memories that you have. There was a famous experiment done where people were interviewed by somebody and they were given a cup of coffee, or interviewed by someone and they were given a cold drink to hold. If you were given a cup of coffee, you generally describe the interviewer as warm. If you were given ice, they were professional. So if you're taking somebody on a date, go to Starbucks, not an ice cream shop. Students who were presented with a word search containing words associated with the elderly, Florida, wrinkles, pension, etc., interviewed on the third floor room, were more likely to take the lift down than to walk down than the other people who were presented with a word search that contained words such as fit and athletic, who then sort of bounded down the steps like a young gazelle. A pair of eyes over an honesty box increases contributions exponentially. So one of the things you can do is design a workplace that subliminally supports safe practice, moving goods safely. If you've got you don't even have to have a sign saying follow the walkways. If there's walkways there, people will generally follow them. Good housekeeping is a major issue for preventing slips, trips and falls, but also non-toxic dusts, that kind of thing. So if you have a shadow board for people to put their implements back on, if you own, then that can be effective. One of our campaigns that it got one of the best responses, although it was sort of quite controversial at the time, was in agriculture. We had a big campaign called Make the Promise, Come Home Safe, which was developed with farmers, partners and kids, etc., saying, what does a family farm mean to you? Well, it's about continuing the family, it's about looking after people, it's about continuity, etc., etc. There's all this emotion built into it. You can tap into that and say, make the promise, come home safe to your family, and also increase provoke that emotion, see the evidence of by putting point of use warnings in form of green promise knots around your farm. 17,000 we sent out via direct mail green promise knots and information about the campaign. We got requests for 17,000 extra promise knots from farmers who did seem to find them useful to put on dodgy gates on the tractor, that kind of thing. It's probably the most important of all. It's very, whatever physical structure you've got around you is going to influence your choices. Somebody was talking about the fruit by the checkout instead of the sweeties, that kind of thing. It's impossible not to have an environment which is going to influence your choices. And again, commercial organisations understand this. If you go to a supermarket, they're pretty much all laid out the same way. You've got your fruit and veg first, which is really annoying because then your grapes are underneath all your shopping when you get to the checkout. And then, but because there's research that shows if you bought fruit and veg, you're more likely to buy treats because it all balances out, doesn't it? If you've had some fruit and veg, you've got some of that in your trolley, then you're more likely to buy treats because you've taken care of the healthy stuff. The stuff you really want, the bread and the eggs in the milk, that's right at the back. You've got to go past all the offers in order to get there. That's structuring your choices. One of the things behavioural insights has been criticised for by some worker organisations is the idea that it puts kind of responsibility onto the worker. We don't think it does. We think the hierarchy of controls still holds. It's still the duty holder's responsibility to keep risk as low as is reasonably possible, but sometimes it's not possible. And nudges are also used to move people up the hierarchy of controls towards, well, ideally eliminating the hazard. One example might be a dead man's switch on a train, which requires active engagement to keep the train going. You can also have a default which tries to isolate people from the hazard. So machinery interlocks, they're a good one. You can defeat them, but you have to go to some degree of effort to defeat them, just as you have to go to some degree of effort to uncheck the default pension contributions box. So people tend to follow the default. You can mandate a choice. For example, the DVLA now makes you say yes or no about whether you want to donate your organs, because it's considered to be a bit of an infringement on liberty to have an opt-out system. But if you say, well, you've got to decide, do you or don't you want to donate your organs, that makes people more likely to donate their organs. So the choice structure has been one of the many things we've discussed in stakeholder groups, and some of the nudges that have come up with, well, a big one in waste and recycling has been trying to get people to avoid systems which encourage speed over correct practice. Piece rates or task and finish rates when you finish and go home is going to encourage people to make the choice to rush round. If you can rotate tasks, you're less likely to encourage repetitive strain injury. So if you can build that into the process, you're repeating tasks. It's hard to use engineering solutions in some environments. For example, we talked to the whisky industry, and they said, well, in Victorian pubs, it's difficult to unload safely. So you train people in flexible techniques so that they can make the correct choice where that's possible. In ceramics, we had some good conversations with them. They talked about one of the drivers of workers only cleaning up at the end of the day was because they thought, well, the dust only affects me, it doesn't affect other people. They always cleaned up at the end of the day. They changed it to rotating the desks, or hot desking your ceramics workplace, they recommended, because then people would not want to leave it in a mess for the next person, so that encouraged them to make the right choice and clean up. The use of proper equipment, i.e. don't use brushes if you've got a lot of dust around, use portable vacuums, is encouraged by only having portable vacuums available. And prominently displaying things, again, that affects choice structure. In California, the order of names on the ballot paper has to be randomly allocated because people tend to choose the first name on the list. So if you have near-miss forms in obvious places around the workforce, around the workplace, obviously that encourages people to fill out near-miss forms. There are problems and limitations to the approach. There's a lot we don't know about subconscious influences. For example, the experiment with telling people that they were using less electricity than their neighbours was thought it was expected to give them a good reward and make them continue. It didn't until people started putting a little smiley box next to that, and then they stuck to their desirable behaviour. Much of the literature is based on experiments with individuals, often sort of 26 North American individuals, rather than organisations. And there is a tool that I think DFT was involved in commissioning, Organiser, which is about using behavioural insights to influence organisations. You can find that on the gov.uk Organiser. And finally, of course, regulatory certainty is still needed for avoiding catastrophe. It's considered to be less burdensome, but it's not a magic bullet, and you do need controls too.